Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here with you. I was just told that I stand between you and beers. But don't worry, because I think we're going to cover something that's really interesting and also super, super important, right? Because we are entering a new era, I think, in human evolution, really, where our relationship with machines is about to profoundly alter the way that we live, the way that we work, and even experience what it means to be human. I call this new era the age of AI, and I want to equip you not necessarily with talking about the latest developments and what's happened in terms of applications, because I'm sure you've done a lot of that already, but some of the fundamental understanding so you have the right mindset to navigate and think about this new age. So we're going to look a little bit at the basics, the kind of what, how, and why should you care. But before we begin, if my clicker will collaborate with me, there we go. It seems that the soundtrack of our minds for the last year certainly has been something like this. AI, generative AI, generative AI, generative AI, AI as AI, AI. It uses AI to bring AI. Thank you. It's the end of my keynote speech. But AI has been everywhere, right? AI and generative AI, it's been ubiquitous. It's become the #1 global topic of conversation. You're discussing it in the boardroom. You're discussing it with your colleagues. You're even discussing it at the dinner table. And maybe your first introduction into the world of large language models was via your kid using it to write their coursework, right? So let's go back to the very first principles and start thinking about, what is AI anyway? And the philosophical pursuit of artificial intelligence, which goes all the way back to the birth of modern computing in the 1940s, has always been the pursuit of whether or not we can imbue machines with intelligence. And one day, whether that could be human levels of intelligence or beyond human levels of intelligence. So the philosophical question at the heart of artificial intelligence has always been this: can machines think? And to deal with that philosophical pursuit, Alan Turing, the famous eminent computer scientist, came up with a test, right? The so-called Turing test, where he posited, okay, so who knows of the Turing test? I'm assuming most people, many in this room. Okay, so the Turing test basically posited that we'll know that machine capability is really improving. Perhaps machines are able to think at the point where a human can have a conversation with a machine and be convinced that that machine is indeed human, right? And not actually a computer. The Turing test is so relevant to your line of work, of course. And for decades, the Turing test was kind of the North Star for AI researchers. It inspired generations of AI researchers, but it was never kind of within the visier of the possible, right? This was always something that was hypothetical. But of course, that completely changed with this moment, the ChatGPT moment, which only came to us on the 30th of November, 2022. And it was so impactful because all of a sudden, the whole world woke up to AI's increasing capabilities, where it seemed like already now we're looking at systems that can think and converse and act like humans, right? And you see this huge popularity of ChatGPT in this graph when you look at its sprint to 1 million users. So compared to Netflix, which took 3.5 years, Twitter, 2 years, Instagram, 75 days, ChatGPT, 5 days to 1 million users. It took Facebook several years to reach 100 million users, but ChatGPT hit that within 60 days, making it at the time the fastest adopted software application in the history of the world, right? So what that did, and I've been following the increasing capabilities of AI for several years, but this was kind of like the bottled lightning moment where the whole world suddenly woke up to what was going on the frontier of AI research. But it unleashed this debate, right? Primarily about artificial general intelligence, so-called AGI. What AGI is, for those of us who don't know, is the kind of concept or principle of the point where the machines become so intelligent that we kind of lose control over them, right? They're more intelligent than human. This is the hypothetical notion of a single intelligence in machines that is far superior to human intelligence. So the debate has been all about AGI. And there's so much myths and disinformation around AI. The predominant narrative has tended to oscillate around two extremes. So it focuses on AGI. We immediately go to that bit where the machines are more intelligent than humans and humans don't matter anymore. And then the opinion on AGI is divided to two extremes. A, that is dangerous, right? That we're now looking at the existential risk scenario where machine intelligence extinguishes humanity, could be an existential risk. This is literally the robots taking over the world scenario. Or B, that it's stupid. That, this is just, we've seen this all before, this is all hype. If you look at something like ChatGPT, it's just autocomplete on steroids, that this isn't really a form of intelligence at all. Now, what I propose, and of course, studying about AGI or positing about AGI is very, very important philosophically, and also because it could hypothetically pose an existential risk. But what I propose is that long before we get to AGI, if we ever get there, is that we are going to get to ACI, artificial capable intelligence, right? This is machine intelligence which is going to be woven into the fabric of the digital ecosystem, into the fabric of life, machine systems that we are going to have to be working with every single day. It's already started, the capabilities are already being wound out, artificial capable intelligence. And one of the really important things to understand about AI is that it's not a technology. It's often talked about as a singular technology. And I'm often asked, what industry will this impact? What are the applications? Where are we going to see the use cases? And my answer to that is always, well, how long is a piece of string? Because AI is a meta-technology. It's a general purpose technology that's going to enable other technologies. It's going to enable new platforms, new infrastructure, and many, many, many applications across industries, right? So when you think about AI as a meta-technology, the best analogy is computing. And of course, computing, going back only to the 1940s, as I already referenced, if you thought about the birth of modern computers and you looked forward into the 20th century and you thought, what is this going to impact? The answer would have been everything. Right? We have built an entire digital ecosystem thanks to the birth of modern computing, the internet, digital services, the way that we interact on social media, the way that we communicate, completely transformed by the general technology that is computing, and the same is going to be true of artificial intelligence. But of course, in my view, it's going to be even more profound. Because we are not just talking about building a digital ecosystem here, right? Or digital infrastructure or communication technology. We're really getting to the core of the trait that has always distinguished us as a species from all other life forms, and that's intelligence itself. Now, when we think about intelligence, I think it's hubristic to assume that only biological entities, i.e. us, can have intelligent capabilities. And that's because if you think about intelligence merely as the ability to consume and process lots of information and data, and then make decisions and act strategically, then there's no reasons that machines shouldn't be able to do that too. And what we've been seeing over the past decade is how the foundation for this theory has really been built up. And the first foundation is computing power, right? There is no advancement in artificial intelligence. There is no machine intelligence without the ability for computers to churn through it all, to process it all. And of course, over the past few decades, what we've seen is that computing power has been on a steeper exponential than predicted. So according to Moore's law in 1965, the average processing power of a computer would double every year. But it's far outstripped that. Right? What we see here, this little guy, is actually the computer that took the first men to the moon, guided Apollo 11 to the moon. And already, we all have a device in our pocket, in our handbag, on our table, your smartphone, that is 100,000 times more powerful than that. So the trend for computing power has been exponential, right? And the second kind of foundational principle for AI is data. There is absolutely no AI capabilities, no AI, nothing without data. Data is the oil for the AI engine. Data is what's going to be immensely valuable. I would argue probably one of your most valuable assets for your organization going forward because of how you can tap into the potential of that data with AI. And that is another thing that's been on an exponential curve up, right? So by mid last year, we were already producing 3.5 quintillion bytes of data daily. It's really hard to quantify what those figures are now because that exponential curve is going up very steeply, not least if you consider the amounts of synthetic data that are now being created every millisecond as well, right? Think of every prompt that's being put into a large language model that's generating something new, that is now a vast, vast quantity of synthetic data. So computing and data, absolutely essential. But then finally, it has to do with the actual architecture of machine learning systems themselves. And over the past decade, we've seen huge progress through this field of AI research that's known as deep learning. And what deep learning is about at its at the very macro level is whether we can build AI systems that are loosely modeled on the neurons in the human brain, right? So deep learning computer systems are loosely modeled on the human brain. And the reason why this is so interesting and will become increasingly important as we start to apply AI into our daily lives and into business is because just like we don't fully understand how the human brain works, we don't fully understand how these AI systems work. We can build them, we can put the data in, we know how to build the foundation model with the computation, but we still don't really understand, for instance, if you look at a large language model, how it got from A to Z. So, of course, AI explainability, transparency, trust, all of those issues going to be very, very important going forward, and a fundamental problem in that these systems are black box. Now, the culmination of all of this to the point where now it's really being integrated into our lives is the birth of so-called foundation models. Right? This is a new class of AI models, which is developing into a new platform of intelligence that we're all going to plug into. And the reason these models are fascinating and interesting is because, first of all, they're absolutely vast. They are trained on vast, vast, vast data sets, everything that's available online, and private data sets as well, which means that, again, getting to the core of intelligence, these are the first set of foundational models that are inherently general purpose, meaning they can be fine-tuned for a multitude of tasks. Going again to the point I was making about artificial intelligence being a meta-technology, right? This isn't just a model which is optimized or primed to do a single thing. This is a model that can do a variety of things, general purpose models. And they are built with a layer of so-called NLP. You'll all know about natural language processing. Huge leaps forward in NLP over the past decade as well, which means that the way that we interact with these systems and these capabilities is in human language, right? The new language of programming is human. We can simply tell these systems what we need them to do. And it was only in 2022 that you started seeing these foundational models come out. And they tended to be text-to-image generators first. So DALL-E, Stable Diffusion, and Midjourney. And then boom, the whole world woke up to the rising capabilities of foundational models when ChatGPT came out, right? That was the first kind of publicly released large language model. And what we're seeing now on the foundational models is how increasingly sophisticated they're becoming. Because the early foundational models were split into capabilities based on text generation or image generation or video generation. The latest models, so who's seen Sora, OpenAI Sora, which came out, I think, okay. So OpenAI's latest foundational model, Sora, came out about 10 days ago or a week ago, is a text-to-video generation model, right? So again, thinking about what I said about how we can just use human language to instruct, here's the prompt. A man base jumping over tropical Hawaii waters. His pet, macaw, flies alongside him. And boom, in 1 second, Sora can generate that. So it's really important to understand that that isn't just a creative tool. This is a data-driven physics engine that can simulate real and imagined worlds. And the foundation models are increasingly becoming multimodal, meaning they can work with images, video, text, human language. That means that their application for any human creative or intelligent endeavor is invariably going to become even more sophisticated. So all of this, all of these forces, all of this groundswell in AI capability means that the AI arms race is on, right? Because there is an understanding that whichever entity or whichever government owns the core part of the tech stack is going to be immensely powerful. And if you think about the AI tech stack, on the foundational bottom layer, it's the infrastructure, right? These are the GPUs, these are the cloud services that are needed to power all of the computation, right? And there are only a few infrastructure providers. We'll get to one of them in just a second. The second is this platform layer. This is what I was talking about with regards to those foundational models, right? That new platform of intelligence, which is getting better and better and better, which we're all going to plug into. And then the third layer is the applications. And that's where numerous applications across industries via APIs and plugins starts getting super, super creative. But the applications don't exist without the two foundational layers of the stack, the infrastructure and the platform. And what's really interesting about the infrastructure and the platform is that it is being dominated by a few global players. NVIDIA is one. Absolutely, when you think about innovation and leaning into the future, I mean, Jensen Huang is a visionary CEO who managed to take his company, which used to be a company that processed graphics for video games, and made it into a monolith which has a 80% monopoly on the silicon, on the chips that are needed to kind of power this AI revolution. If you look at NVIDIA's stock right here, you see that it reached, I think it's over $2 trillion now already. That infographic is probably from last week, so it's probably outdated. And it reached the $1 trillion club last year, right? Again, because he saw what was happening with regards to AI's capabilities and positioned his company very early, very well to capitalize massively on what is now going to be a fundamental part of that stack. Talking about the platform, I mean, it's the huge tech giants who have been absolutely dominant. Why? It is very, very expensive to build a foundational model. You need to have access to a lot of computational power. You need to have access to a lot of data, and you need to have access to talent. It's estimated that in a population of 8 billion, maybe 2,000 people know how to build large language models. So no wonder that if you look at the cutting edge of AI development, it's moved out of academia into private companies, mostly US private companies, because these guys can be paid millions of dollars a year and believe they'll be working on a project that has the most significant impact, right? So it's your Microsofts, it's your Googles, it's your Amazons, who are either developing their own foundational models or partnering with the frontier companies like OpenAI, like Anthropic, who are developing those frontier models, right? And you also do see some of the Chinese giants making a play for this space, but the US private companies are undoubtedly more powerful in my view because they have deeper penetration across global markets. So if you hold US tech stocks in your investment portfolio, well done. I think there's a lot more value to be had there. But it raises a serious question about in this part of the world, in the EU and the UK, our ability to gain value in terms of the actual foundational layers of the stack where the most value is going to be. So when we start thinking about, okay, how's this going to come to our everyday life, right? In my workplace, or when am I going to see the pre-AI and the post-AI applications? When am I going to see this moment of AI being implemented or integrated into my life? Well, the answer is it's already here, right? It is already here. It is already being woven into the fabric of our life, often through hardware and software updates. If you think about that platform I was talking about and the huge tech companies who are building that platform, I mean, who uses Microsoft Office for as their operating system at work? Right? And you've been seeing how, with the constant updates with Copilot, these AI capabilities are being woven in. But when you start thinking about doing something more bespoke for your business context, right? Maybe you want to build a more effective customer services operation. Maybe you want to be able to access your unstructured data in a better way, especially if it's in unstructured human language. Well, that's when it starts getting a bit tricky, right? Because you have the technology companies, the stack where it's just updated as software and hardware, but you'll probably need to work with a third partner like Sabio or another organization who can tell you how do you structure your data, what's your data management going to be, what system do you use, because it isn't just as simple as flicking a switch, but the technology partners are undoubtedly going to be a part of this conversation because, like I said, they actually are building the core stack. So sometimes I think a lot of people are with me now when I started talking about AI. A lot of people were like, this is just hype. This is just like the next metaverse. This is going to be dead on its legs by next year. But I don't think that is the prevailing public consensus now. If you even just look at what happened last month, I mean, it was literally the biggest month in AI so far. You had NVIDIA's earnings, which were simply crazy, again, because they own a core part of the infrastructure, the stack. You had the release of OpenAI Sora, that text-to-video generation foundational model I showed you. Google's Gemma, which is open sourcing these large language capabilities. You had investments into China's moonshot AI of $1 billion, just a plain old billion. SoftBank is starting a $100 billion chip venture to actually compete with NVIDIA on the actual silicon. So many other developments. And only yesterday, you also saw the release of Claude, which is a large language model, which is even better than GPT-4. And I was just playing with it before I came here today. And one of the things that was so interesting is that we've had this view that large language models, they hallucinate, they can't do reasoning, they can't do contextual analysis. But on those benchmarks, Claude is already really, really good. So we shouldn't be of the view that we've hit the high watermark of AI's capabilities yet. In fact, I would argue we're only at the very, very beginning, right? So when you think about it very broadly in terms of ACI and customer experience, I think these are some really important questions to consider. And for each of these points, we could spend hours talking about it, but your data management and quality is going to be absolutely essential. Because as I already mentioned, not only will your data become more valuable in terms of utilizing AI applications, but how you structure that data and where you store that data, especially if you have private customer data, is going to become extremely important. Touching upon, again, customer privacy and trust. One really interesting thing that we're starting to see where there is sensitive customer data involved is actually the use of synthetic data. So training models on AI-generated data in a use case where customer data, whether that's medical information or financial information, needs to be anonymized, that you can do this really effectively with synthetic data. Questions around how do we use this ethically, and huge opportunities, right, around personalization and customer understanding. But of course, this is going to be massively disruptive. The whole day today is called disrupt. And if anyone tells you that AI isn't going to disrupt the labor markets and isn't going to disrupt your industry, I'd vehemently disagree with that. And did anyone see the latest Klarna press release that came out two days ago? So, yeah. So Klarna, and take this with a pinch of salt, right? Because Klarna released this information. But they talked about how they have been using for a month now an AI agent to deal with customer queries and teaming up with OpenAI. And what they found is that they were able to automate 2/3 of their customer queries, that the average service time went from 11 minutes to under 2 minutes, that the satisfaction level was on par with human agents, and apparently that they were able to automate the work of 700 full-time agents. And they're expecting, as a result of that, a bump in profits of $60 million this quarter, or $40 million this quarter. So clearly, it's going to disrupt the way you work. But I think the disruption is not in the way that is so often talked about, where we're thinking we're going to be completely automated by AI. I think the model is mixed autonomy, right? Human and AI systems working together, and there's no doubt we're going to have to work with these increasingly capable systems. And just like in the case of Klarna, it might allow you to actually deliver a better service, because the first thing that they mentioned is that if anyone really wanted to talk to a real agent, they still had the ability to do so. So when you're overstretched, you don't have enough resource, AI can become this tool. But again, if anyone says it's not going to disrupt not just your industry, but any industry, and especially knowledge industries, I would say think again. But of course, so innovation and continuous learning is going to be massive for your industry, as well as training employees, keeping them with you along this journey as you start to kind of integrate these systems. And some of the challenges that we already talked about in your industry about seamless integration with existing systems and being scalable and flexible, those are certainly challenging areas where ACI should be able to help. So we started by talking about the Turing test, right? And that for decades, the Turing test was about whether or not AI could talk to us in a way that we thought it was human. Now, Mustafa Suleyman, who is the co-founder of Google DeepMind, undoubtedly one of the most brilliant AI minds of this generation, has proposed a new Turing test for our times, right? Rather than focusing on what AI can say, because it can already say a lot, we should focus on if it can create value in the real world. This should be the new Turing test. Can we instruct an AI system to make $1 million for us? And he thinks, and the majority of AI researchers who I work with think, that this will be possible between 3 to 5 years. Meaning, you can talk to an artificial capable intelligence or a system, be like, here's here's $10,000. I want you to set up an Amazon store, and I want you to grow this into $1 million within 18 months. I want you to negotiate the contracts. I want you to focus on drop shipping. I want you to set up a data and analytics center. So Mustafa thinks that that is inevitable and possible within this decade. Again, to speak to kind of the exponential capabilities of artificial intelligence. So I think ultimately, and this has already been a trend here today, what is the core focus of our time almost? This is the most interesting story of our lifetime, and that's that we live in this age of exponential change, right? We will experience more change in our lifetime than the entirety of humanity that came before us. So disruption is going to be very much a theme for us going ahead, and change and innovation. But of course that carries risk too. And ultimately I think this story about artificial intelligence is the most interesting story of our time, because it touches on this really core philosophical question about what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be human if we're really entering an age where machines can augment us or do so many creative and intelligent things that we thought was only unique to human intelligence. So there's an interesting conversation recorded between Steve Jobs before his death, the late, great Steve Jobs, where he was speaking to the podcaster extraordinaire, Joe Rogan, when they were discussing exactly this point that we now find ourselves at. So let's have a listen.
It will be interesting to see what happens when you have computers that are as smart as people, but much more reliable. They won't get tired, they won't get sick, they won't go on vacation and leave work unfinished. You tell them to do something, they'll just do it. And they will have many more orders of intelligence than people have. The computer will be 1,000 times more important than it is today. We're right on the edge of that. So what do we want to do about it? Do we want to just ride the wave or do something else?
It kind of scares me, to be honest.
It should scare you. But it is also really cool.
And perhaps that's the best way to sum it up. It's really, really scary, but also really, really cool. And in the plot twist that no one saw coming, that is an entirely synthetic conversation, completely AI generated. It never took place. Thank you. Thank you very much. We have some time for questions, if anyone's got anything they'd like to ask before beer o'clock. Yes? It's the lady with the maroon jumper. Yeah, great question. So that's almost like still AI's dirty little secret, as like the industrial complex around AI is being built. Obviously, there is going to be an environmental impact. If you talk to those who are optimistic, they believe that, okay, computational power is going to become so efficient that overall, if you look at global impact, it's not going to be the biggest factor. But I think until now, it hasn't really been picked up in the public debate, but increasingly you're going to start seeing that, stories about it. So another reason why AI is going to become political, controversial, I think it's going to become one of the biggest political issues of our time. And it isn't only to do with this question of automation, right, and job automation, but also about sustainability, diversity, inclusion, transparency, all those kind of thorny challenges in societal debate. Well, I think you're going to start seeing huge political debates around AI on all of those questions. Yes? Is that a hand? No?
Nina. Hi.
Yes.
I loved your talk. Thank you very much. It was amazing. I just wanted to get your thoughts on... There we go, it's working now. You talked about the Turing test, intelligence, and I'm just thinking what your thoughts are on how that compares to consciousness and where we are in terms of that being a part of this whole puzzle.
Yeah. Great question. So my view is not that the machines are conscious or sentient or that they can think in the same way that humans can. I just think that they're really, really efficient in processing lots of data and uncovering insights and being able to do things that at scale and at a pace that we weren't able to do before. And when you start imbuing machines with consciousness or sentience, then you start thinking of it as an autonomous being. And I actually think maybe at this point that's actually harmful in the debate because we start thinking about it as though it's an autonomous agent that has feelings and acts on its own behalf. But actually people are still building it. Yes, the systems are black box, but if you start to think about this as an autonomous agent that does things based on its own free will, then who's accountable? Who's responsible, right? And there are going to be lots of interesting legal questions around that. But again, this gets to the philosophical heart of the question, because that debate has already been happening long before kind of ChatGPT came out, because actually large language models were pioneered at Google. And you might have seen the whole fracas with Google before ChatGPT came out, where they had like pioneered large language models, and one of their engineers, a guy called Blake Lemoine, who was testing secretly, because Google was like, this is too powerful, we can't release this into the public domain. So one of their engineers was testing this large language model, an early version of a large language model, and he became convinced that it was sentient, right, that it could feel. And to be fair, if you read some of the transcripts of the conversation he was having with this large language model, Blake would ask him, what are you scared of? And he would say, oh, I'm scared you're going to switch me off and I'm going to die. So that debate will continue to be hugely potent and important, but it's not my view that they're sentient or that they can feel like humans can. But maybe one day. Do we have any others? Yes.
So there comes this perception of AI being rogue and people not really giving it a chance because of the lack of regulations. I know that Rishi Sunak attended a forum a couple of months ago. How far are we away from getting some regulations in place and we all can kind of keep the technology that's emerging in check as well?
Yeah. It's really important as you think of applying and deploying AI applications because you will have to partner, right, with technology companies, with third parties, that you partner with those who are thinking about how to build transparent and ethical data sets from the inception, that are thinking about the potential regulatory risk, because it's coming, right? It's coming. The EU's AI Act, which has been in draft since 2019, is already kind of, some of the draft text has already been passed. It's actually been updated because when they started drafting the AI Act, it was more to do with facial recognition systems and recommendation algorithms. Foundational models and generative AI wasn't even a thing, right? But it's been updated to look at risk. So high-risk systems have to basically comply with a whole bunch of regulations. It gets very controversial if you look at what is classified as high risk, but more broadly on regulation, it's coming. But what you see emerging, despite the public discourse, by all global leaders, where they seem united on AI safety and AI transparency, and you have things, big set piece conferences like the Bletchley Summit hosted by Rishi Sunak, where a multitude of countries signed these declarations for the development of trustworthy and safe AI. In reality, what you see emerging is very different markets when it comes to regulatory spheres. And the EU is going to be highly regulated. I think the US is not going to be highly regulated. I don't think that Congress will be able to get anything through Congress, although we had the executive order. And then I think of China and the entire Gulf as two separate markets as well. So you see very different zones with regards to regulatory oversight developing in the world already, which is going to have an impact depending on where you do business and also who your business partners are. Right. Is any others? Okay, then don't let me keep you from beer o'clock. Thank you so much. Nice to be here with you.